It's not like if you take an aspirin, you're committing some kind of sin because of pharmakeia. I'm talking about mind-altering, hallucinogenic, and with the intention of producing an altered state. That's not what today's medical community is about. So to conflate the two is really flawed thinking.
Were drugs tied to spiritual warfare in biblical times? That's an interesting
Well, I
question.
don't know that we could use spiritual warfare. If you're defining spiritual warfare as the production of altered states to be in contact with spirit beings, the answer is yes. If you're talking about the use of drugs to combat evil spirits, then I don't know that the answer would be yes at all. I can't think of an example where biblically drugs are used to combat spiritual forces. In terms of primary text, they were certainly used to produce altered states, to be in contact with spiritual forces. You get a lot of that, not only in Greco-Roman literature, which is where we usually think of it, Paul's reference to pharmakeia, for instance, but it goes all the way back into the ancient Near East, where you get mind-altering or this production of altered states to put you in a different state of mind, in a different frame of mind, in a different mental place. It's hard to know what vocabulary to use. But because things that were experienced or seen while under the influence of certain drugs, the two things became associated: contact with the other side and then the use of certain mind-altering drugs. And the mind-altering part is important. It's not like if you take an aspirin, you're committing some kind of sin, that we shouldn't take medications because of pharmakeia. I'm talking about mind-altering, hallucinogenic, these sorts of things that are pretty hard drugs. Doing this intentionally and with the intention of producing an altered state. That's not what today's medical community is about. So to conflate the two and use one side to beat the other side over the head is really flawed thinking. So I'm going to try to be clear about what we're saying and not saying.
Yes, and also there is the Enochian tradition about the use of drugs as knowledge given by the Watchers and in Second Temple thinking.
Yeah, that's quite illustrative of the Second Temple. It's much older than that as well.
I don't know if there is some commandment against use of hallucinogen in the Torah.
In the list in Deuteronomy 18 of prohibited practices, you get things like potions or certain plants referenced. So when you get into that area, again, this is where these mind-altering things come from. And so your shamans or your medical practitioners of certain cultures, pagan cultures maybe, might be known for producing these charms or these sorceries or these herbal solutions. We should just look up Deuteronomy 18 here, just to give you an idea here of what we're talking about. Here in India, we have things like interpreting omens. It's very broad language. Sorcerer, charmer. These terms elsewhere, if you really dig down into the Hebrew meaning of these terms and the ancient Near Eastern cognate terms for these Hebrew terms, you do get into the areas of plants and herbs for drug use, to produce altered states or to produce experiences that have something to do with contacting the other side. So the English translations obscure some of this vocabulary. I don't know if this is publicly available. The book I'm thinking of is Ann Jeffers has a really good book on divination, Magic and Divination in Ancient Palestine and Syria. This is the book I'm thinking of. It's one of these scholarly books that you got to take out a loan to get, published by Brill. Brill is infamous for its expensive books. But on the other hand, there's nothing else that's good either, and they know it, which is why they do it. But it's just up to you. But at some point, you've got to invest in resources if you want to get into this material. You're not going to just find it out there floating on the internet.
Yeah, so I thought that there was nothing in the Torah about that specifically. And I was wondering why Paul made that reference to pharmakeia. And I thought, well, maybe it's just Second Temple Enochian tradition that Paul is making reference. But maybe there is a precedent that's before.
There's precedent. And of course, that precedent is going to be mediated to Paul through Second Temple literature as well.